So everybody can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Yes, sir.
So fine. We are done. 25 people are here. 42 people have registered, but it's fine. FTI has only 10 seats and 24 people are more than enough. So if they don't understand the meaning of timing, they would not understand the meaning of cinematography, because cinematography means 6 o'clock sunrise happen and your camera has to be there at 5:30. So anyway, just I'll give you the brief before we carry on with the thing. Sometime it can happen the internet connection will go off. Today I'm hoping it will not, but I will work out the plan B so that our recording should not get messed up. But today you have to take a little chance. A. B. Some of you have already understanding of the photography. Some knows 30%, some knows 50%, some knows 70%. But I have checked with each and everyone over here that none of them is 100%. I have asked certain question and people were failed to answer it, but that's fine. Someday you are zero. You have to begin with the zero and slowly you build up upon that. So if you know something, good. Some of the thing will not be very clear because I'm not talking about from a bookish format. I'm talking about from the experience point of view, which are the thing which you cannot find here and there so easily. But when you work as a experience in a particular field, you will understand many things. So if you know certain things, what I'm talking is good. But even if you don't know, out of 10 things which I mentioned, 2 things if you don't know, that is being added to your knowledge. And you should be happy with that you 2 things got added to your knowledge. Some people it would be 4, some people it would be fine. For some people it would be 10 also, because they are completely zero. Or some are today little bit knowing from here and there. So I'm assuming there would be people from different levels. So don't get irritated in the fact why I'm talking about basics. No, I have to assume that you don't know anything, and then out of that you will be able to figure it out what you already know and what you don't know. So there are 2 parts of the lecture in the future as well as today. Technical part, and the second part is called aesthetic part. So slowly first we will cover up the technical, and simultaneously on and off we will also cover the aesthetic part, which has 2 things, which is the application of that particular tool, and that's what FTI entrance exam basically asks for. They will not ask you straightway forward what is shutter speed and what is this and that. They will ask the application of that. That is my understanding of entrance exam so far. But you need to get ready for the fact that the pattern can change at any time. And at that point, you will not go back and rush back to me and then you say, now we need to have another class because the pattern has changed. And how do you will come to know the pattern has changed? They will announce it only and only, not on their website. They're least bothered about announcing the thing on their website. They will announce only in the prospectus. That is the only place where you would come to know what is the change in the pattern. If there would be any change. If there is no change, then you assume that it is the same as it is last time. So announcement of pattern change would be done only through a document called prospectus. Hard copy of PDF file would be loaded on the website as and when the next entrance exam would happen. So far as my calculation goes, FTI entrance exam would not happen till February for sure. 100 times people have asked me when the exam is happening. My answer is, if it happened tomorrow, are you ready? If not, then go and prepare. Forget about when it is going to happen. So 6 months are at your hand. This February, March could have also happen next year. April, May, June, July, August. It can push up to August, depend upon the circumstances FTI has. So this is in brief about that. Coming back to our pattern of the examination. So far, 30 marks is MCQ, 70 marks is domain specific. There is a possibility that it might change at any given point of a time, that they will say, okay, instead of 70 marks of domain specific, we will have a 20 marks MCQ objective connected with the technical aspect. It can happen. There's a probability of that. So you need to get ready for that also. All the questions keep at your end. Write down your questions, or what I would suggest is type into the chat box Because chat box only you can write the question to me, not to other people. It is only directing towards me. So if you have a question, instead of raising the hand, just write down into a chat box. Chat box is open. I will read it. If it need to be answered immediately, I would answer that. If it need to be answered later on, I would answer later on for the last 30 minutes I have kept for that purpose only. Okay. So this is in brief. So that is my anticipation about the pattern change. It cannot go back to that IQ thing, mental ability. It used to be 3 years back. So if you look into the 3 years back paper, there used to be a 20 marks of IQ check, mental ability, they call it as a. So far, the 30 marks, considering the last 2 years pattern, 30 marks is for MCQ and 70 marks is for domain specific. Okay. Now, very often people ask, MCQ would be the same for everyone? No. No. Check the various MCQ. For cinematography, they would be different than the direction, than the acting. So it can happen that 50% of the question are same, 50% are different. It can happen that 30% are different, 20% are different. There is no fixed formula. Okay, formula in the sense there is no fixed guideline in that sense of the term. So last year there was a question about a painting by Amrita Shergill. Last year means not JET 2020 I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm talking about JET 2020. It's a 21 right now. It is still not loaded on the FTII website, but since I'm in touch with many people who appear in the last year entrance exam. So this was one of the question about the bride's toilet is a painting by ABCDE. You can't guess until unless you know it. Tukkebaji is not allowed, but you can guess it. There's no problem. If there is a negative marking, you have be careful. Be careful about the negative marking also, because many people do this tukkebaji into the MCQ section. So FTII may announce next time that there could be a negative marking, which means if you leave the answer unanswered, then it is 0. If you correctly tick it, then it is +1. If you wrongly ticked it, then it is a -1. So when the prospectus is announced next year, make sure that you read it carefully and figure it out. There is no negative marking is introduced into the FTII, because that can also be introduced. That is an anticipation. So far it is not. Okay. So under MCQ, the advantage of MCQ is, as I said, particularly for domain specific cinematography related question, that if you know it, then you get +100% marks. And in domain specific, if your answer is not really very focused and impressive. I have noticed many people talking blah, 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 blah. There is no time of blah, 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 blah. If I ask you what is ND filter, the answer has to be ND filter is a filter which cuts down the intensity of light without changing the color temperature. Full stop. It has to be that sharp. And I'm not reading from the screen. So that kind of clarity is required in your answers. You do blah, 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 blah. Examiner will come to know immediately that this guy has some vague idea. And vague idea means vague marks, 50%, 40%, 60%. If you want 100% mark in domain specific, your answer has to be very clear cut, written down into a specific words. And that's it. More specific you are, more you impress the examiner. And if I would read it and it start from the beginning, your answer sheet would be checked from the top, page number 1, page number 2, page number 3. So page number 1, I would figure it out whether this person is a vague person or is a very clear person. So answer has to be very focused. Is a technical and aesthetics. Even in aesthetic, there's a technical understanding is required to answer them clearly. Okay. So we start without wasting the time. Camera parts. Sometime I would go back into a little bit of a history of the still camera, because if you don't understand the history, you will not understand the modification done into the digital world. So occasionally I would also talk about the historical things which are important to understand what is now. Now it is sensor, earlier it used to be 35 mm negative. So I would do comparative study also, because nowhere it is written what is the syllabus. There's no syllabus. Syllabus could be anything. They might just write down, if ever in the history of FTII there would be a syllabus, they might just write down one thing. Basic of film image and processing. Now today there is no chemical processing. Chemical processing means earlier what it used to be. So sometime on and off, I would also be talking about that, though you may not have read it so far, but it is important to understand that also. The history of anything is important for its development, what it is now, particularly for photography and cinematography. Both. So as we all know that the single lens reflex camera, so SLR we used to call it. Now it is called DSLR because D stand for digital. So digital camera, and that's it. So single lens reflex camera. So it as you can see it over here, camera body, self timer button. There's a button over there where you could set the timer of 5 seconds, 10 seconds. There used to be a button on the top where you will set the timer, and sometime it is just auto. Auto means it will take 10 seconds. You can't time it. Like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, you could not. Earlier, you just press this self timer button, and maybe after 7 seconds or 8 seconds, every camera has a fixed one. So you go, press the button and come and sit in front of it and wait for this 7 seconds to happen, and then it will click, and there you are. There was no exact timing used to be there. Now today you can do the exact timing. That's the advantage of a digital. I would keep doing the comparative study for digital versus non-digital. So they might ask, after all this discussion, very important thing is what is going to be the question in the examination. That's a very, very important thing. Otherwise, this is all blah, 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 blah. So question and what answer is suitable. I am not going to give you the answers. I'm not going to give you the answers. I would be talking about answers and I would be giving you the questions. Okay. So once you know the question, then you can also formulate the answer. I'm not going to check your answers also. In this PPT, everything I have made certain pointers in order to explain it to better. How you would write those pointers is totally your decision. Okay. So here you could see the film advance lever, which means earlier the film used to be physically moved forward. It will not, after clicking the button, it will not automatically move until unless it has a motor drive. There used to be a motor drive. If it has a motor drive, so after the click, it will go trrr. It means the exposed part of the picture negative is being moved forward, and at the gate where there is a pressure plate behind, there is an unexposed picture negative has already been placed over there. So that was the job of motor drive. If the camera don't have a, it used to be separately attached to it. Later on, it keep coming along with the camera. So that was the slowly the advancement had happened. So film advance lever is something which after clicking, if you do not advance the film further, it will not click again. This was the beauty of this thing. So why it was like that? Because so that you will not re-expose the same picture negative again. By mistake, it can happen. You exposed it. Now you forget to forward it. So you want to expose again. So it will not happen. Why? Because you have not moved the exposed picture negative forward. That was the reason why it was like that. So shutter release button, as I said that you need to press the shutter. Once you press it, the shutter will go down. It has a couple of blades and different kind of mechanisms. Very, very delicate mechanism it was. And if you touch it by finger, it might get damaged. So one has to be very careful. It was, you could physically feel the shutter also. It was a couple of blades put together. And it was a very, very precise mechanism because shutter speed is 1/30th of a second. So shutter would open up only for 1/30th of a second. That's it. I would talk about how you could check if the shutter opening is correct or not at some point. Not immediately, but at some point I would check. This could be a question, can be formulated. Write down this question. How you would check in the DSLR time that your shutter is working properly. It means 1/30th of a second is giving 1/30th correctly or not, or whether it is 1/20th or whether it is a 1/40th. So how you would check the shutter precision in the time of when it used to be a SLR camera. So that could be a question. You can't say, oh, we didn't know. It was not mentioned in the syllabus. We are the digital world people. We don't know how it was. So nobody is going to listen. Any question can be formulated. So be ready for any kind of a question. So how you would check the shutter speed is 1/30th is correct or not? Think tomorrow, figure it out, then we would discuss. Okay. So shutter, precision of the shutter is very, very important. 1/30th should give 1/30th, not 1/28, not 1/32 also. There is a way to figure it out. Use your common sense, you will be able to figure it out. Shutter speed dial. So physically you could move the shutter speed over there. There is an image here, you could see it. There is a small button over there, not very clear cut image, but doesn't matter. So there is a shutter speed. You could easily figure it out, these kind of images in the Google, where it is written 1/30th of a second. They don't write 1/30th of a second. They just say sometimes 30, 250. 250 means 1/250th of a second. The way you say USA, you don't say USA. You say US. US means not USSR, but United States of America. So shutter speed dial will mention the things over there, which means what is the shutter speed? You could set it physically over there, and there were varieties of options available: 1/30th, 60th, 250. This was also a question of general knowledge. I remember in FTI interview, one of my colleague, my batchmate, there was a Nikon camera was placed on the table, and the Nikon camera model was Nikon FM2. And the faculty member asked the candidate, what is the highest shutter speed of this camera? What does it mean? What does it mean? How do you know that what is the highest shutter speed? It's a Nikon. Nikon was the king at some point. One of the best, most respected brand was Nikon. It is still there, but Canon has more or less taken over. So Nikon means the best. So Nikon FM2, FM, F3, FA, FG, these were the models available in the market, just 5. And FM3 was the most popular. FM was also popular. So from the look itself, from the distance, if I'm sitting at a 7 feet distance and I can look at the camera and I would know that this is FM2. Okay. And I am supposed to know that FM2 is having a shutter speed of 1/2000 of a second as the highest shutter speed of that camera. So indirectly what the professor was asking, or the examiner was asking in the interview, that are you aware of the fact that Nikon FM2 has the highest shutter speed? So he was asking what is the highest shutter speed of Nikon FM2. So instead of asking that, he said, tell me what is the highest shutter speed of this camera. The boy was really innocent. He said, sir, the camera is there. I'm sitting here. How can I tell you what is the highest shutter speed of this camera? So sometimes these kind of people are also taken because it was a little innocent answer. But today, if you answer like this, you will be out. It means you don't know. You don't know the highest shutter speed of Nikon FM2. So you are supposed to know all that. Okay. So indirect question can be asked, not directly, but indirectly, the people can ask the question. So shutter speed highest, suppose you say, see, the moment you open your mouth in the interview or orientation, you say, I have a Nikon Falana Dimka, or you have a Canon Falana Dimka. You are supposed to know each and every damn thing under the sun about that camera. Otherwise, don't open the mouth. Don't say, I have this camera, or I have used this camera, but you can't get rid of the fact. If you have reached over there, if you say, I have not used the camera, then you are out. Because out of 35 people, 25 people would be the people who have used the camera. So if you not use the camera, then go back, come next year, and we will see whether you have used the camera. So we'll talk about that thing later on, what exactly they expect in the interview and all that. Practical applicability of the still and video, both. I would use the term practical applicability. Many of you are sitting in this group of 46 or 43 people. They don't have a practical experience. So start gaining the practical experience through some way or other. I don't know how. It's your problem, solve it. So theory, after clearing the theory, the second step, they check your practical understanding of still and video, both. Okay, which means lighting up inside the studio, taking the photographs and other things. That included also the video. So shutter speed, indirectly they can ask the question like this. Accessory shoe. What is the shoe business over there? You could mount a flash over there and flash would connect with that. Now this, we call it a hot shoe because it has certain pointers. Now the flash used to be variety of kind of flash. At some point we will also discuss that, not today. So flash used to be dedicated flash. Flash used to be manual flash. There were variety of features available. So it will have a 4 points, 5 points, dot, small dot, and they were the connector of the flash unit with that, which will get connected if it is automatic or not. So that connection would happen through those 5 or 4 pointers which are given in the hot shoe over there, so that it will work in compatibility with the hot shoe. Then film rewind knob. Once film is being exposed properly, then down there used to be a small knob over here where the self timer button is there at the bottom of the camera, where you press this small knob and this will unhook the film inside, and then from this film rewind knob you could wind the whole film, and there would be a tension till it get unwind, till it get winded properly. This tension would be released and it will become very free. So now you know the film is being winded properly inside, and now you can open the back flip over there, and now you can take the cassette out. If it is not rewinded, you can't take the cassette out. So that is the purpose of this film rewind knob. And then there's an index indicator. What is this index indicator is? Suppose you have shot the 12 exposure. How do you know that is 12 or 13? So this index indicator will mention the number there. 12 is a mechanical ring which will show the this 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So till 36 exposure, it will show the index, how many pictures are being exposed so far. Okay. So these are the various things. And there is a one more button. There should be another button over there. We will discuss, called depth of field preview button. Up there, near close to the self timer button, there used to be a button called depth of field preview button. I would discuss when I will talk about depth of field in the detail. So film, there was a time where almost for so many years, there used to be a cassette which has two kind of negative. One is a black and white negative, another was the color negative. And then there used to be the 24 exposure. The cassette would be a 24 exposure, or it would be a 36 exposure. Again, the cassette would come with a specification of film speed and whether it is balanced for daylight or whether it is balanced for tungsten light. No film was balanced for both. There was no film like that which is balanced for both. Okay. So if an examiner wanted to check your little historical knowledge about the time when there used to be a cassette, it can ask you a question, MCQ question, where whether the film was balanced for a tungsten only, whether the film was balanced only for daylight, or it was balanced for tungsten and daylight, or you could choose whether you can set the setting over there, whether it's daylight. There was no setting of tungsten balance or daylight balance. There was no setting like that into the camera where you could choose that option. So related to the history, question like that can be formulated into a MCQ format. So far there is no, but if it happens, you should be ready for that. So film used to be either for daylight balance or tungsten balance. 85% of the time, it was very difficult to find a film which was balanced for tungsten. In the still photography I'm talking about, not for the cinema. Cinema, it was easily available for both kind, but for the still photography, only the daylight balance film used to be available easily. At least in India, it was very difficult to find a tungsten balance film in those days. It was existing, but India was not importing. Not so much of work was happening probably. But how people used to work inside the studio, they will put a 80B filter, which is of blue color, which will convert the daylight into a tungsten balance in terms of the skin tone. So the light entering would be balanced for the daylight because your film is balanced for the daylight. But there was no choice, you could do it. 90% of the time people were using the daylight balance film, even if they are shooting inside the studio where there's a performance is happening of a dance or music, because I've done so much of a performances shoot. So I know this was, so what was the problem? Problem was, if your film is 100 ASA, if you put a filter, it will eat away the 3/4 of a stop, which means your film would become somewhere around 50 ASA. Half, more or less, I would say, not 50 exactly, but 60 or 70 ASA. So what we used to do is, we used to buy a 400 ASA film. 400 ASA film we will buy if we are shooting inside the studio or some auditorium where the performance will be lit with the tungsten light, and we wanted to capture the correct skin tone, and you can't use the flash there. Inside the performance, flash is not allowed. It's available light photography. You need to do it. So they can ask any question if you have a film which is balanced for. So remember, you are going for cinematography. You are going for a course called cinematography. So in cinematography, there are two kind of film available into the stocks, because still at some places people do uses the negative. I don't know where exactly, but some crazy people still use the 35mm negative. Despite everything is digital, but 98% of the time it is digital. 2% of the time some people are still trying to revive that old nostalgia and feel and look and blah, blah, blah about the film. So the question can be formulated, which we will talk about in the case of filters, that if the film is balanced for daylight and you are shooting inside a performance of a dancer, so what kind of filter you will use to get the correct skin tone and why? Okay, so you can't go like a Hanuman and put the filter in front of the lights, but 20 lights are being there. You can do that also. In cinema you can do. But in performance, you can't go there and put the filter in front of the light. The only way to put the filter is in front of your lens. So you use the ATB filter. There was different shades of this blue, A, B, C. Some variation is there so that you can do the color correction correctly, but normally there used to be one kind of normal filter, ATB we call it. So ATB would correct the skin tone and you get the correct skin. Correct means quite closer to what you will get if your film would have been balanced for daylight. Tungsten light, because tungsten light film was not available at those days. So film material was the thing. Developing process. When the film is being shot in the dark, you take out the thing and you go to the dark room and you do the developing. I will talk about a little bit this very briefly. I will talk about so that you understand what this business is all about. So camera, everybody knows. So what are the parts of the camera? Digital camera, IP kind of camera, movie camera, pinhole camera, pocket camera, single lens, twin lens reflex. Maybe you have seen a camera which is like a dabba, which used to have the two lenses over there. So there was a time when people used to look from the top, and this camera was also popular into the studio, particularly if you go for a portrait. Twin lens reflex camera was very popular with some of them. Video camera and camera phone. Nowadays, camera has a phone. So these are the brands everybody knows: Nikon, Fuji, Canon, Casino. What is it? Casio. Casio is not a very popular brand, but Panasonic, Sony, Polaroid Corporation was a camera which came by it used to be called Polaroid camera. There was a time when negative was there and people wanted to see immediately the rough idea, how this picture would look like. So they will also shoot with a Polaroid camera. It was not a very high resolution image, but you will instantly would be able to figure it out what exactly the photograph looked like. So Polaroid camera was also popular at some point during the negative days. So part of a camera, I would talk about the important part of a camera is, this could be, see, these kind of a question can be formulated into a MCQ part or maybe a descriptive part. Mention 5 important parts of a still camera and their use. Sometimes you don't anticipate these kind of questions. They are very simple question, but simple question, it is simple because you know it. If you don't know, it is a difficult. So if you are hearing first time all these names, it might be difficult. But if you're already familiar with these, then it's fine. So viewfinder. Now I would, as I said, I would keep comparing the cinema thing also. So still photography, the viewfinder has this, this small piece where you press your eyes and then you look into it. Okay. So that was the time when the live viewfinder was not there. What you see today is a live viewfinder. There's an option. You can go look, put your eyes into that viewfinder and you could see it. And that was the time. So viewfinder is one part of the camera. Focusing mechanism. So when there is a lens, you need to first of all also focus it. We will talk about into the lensing when we'll talk about depth of field, what this focus business is all about. So basically when we focus, we always focus at a particular distance. So 8, 9, 10, 7, 6. And there is a minimum focusing distance beyond which you cannot focus a camera. Okay. So there is a minimum distance, and what is the maximum distance? It is infinity. So infinity is the maximum distance you can focus. Maybe after 30 feet, it's infinity. Okay. So every lens has a ring called focusing ring. Now, in a zoom lens, we will talk about the focusing ring and the zoom in and zoom out ring of a still camera used to be the same. We call it as a single touch zoom lens. And where these rings are different, we used to call it as a double touch zoom lens. Okay. So in cinema, there used to be always double touch, not single. There's a reason behind it. I will talk about it later on when we'll talk about zoom lens. So there's a focusing ring on which the distance is marked very clearly in terms of feet, and you could focus your shot whatever where you want, and in the viewfinder you will see whether the focus is happening or not. You can clearly see. So there used to be a split ring inside the ground glass when you are focusing, and then this ring would match half and half, and you know now the focusing is done properly. Okay, so focusing today, everything is digital, everything is touch screen, but there was a time when you used to do a manual focusing. So in cinema, despite all these auto business happening, you still prefer to do a manual focusing, though there is a gadget which can done the auto focusing for you, but it's an expensive gadget. We'll talk about that at that point. So you have a focusing ring where you could focus the camera into a still photograph. Then there's a shutter. Shutter is, as I told you, shutter is some mechanism which will allow the light to interact with the film plane, and it could be 1/30th of a second. It start in a half or double. So suppose it is 30, 60, 120. They call it as a 125, and then there's a 500, which means 1/500th of a second. Then there was a 1000 and 2000. Some of the camera also has a shutter speed little higher, say 4000, which means 1/4000th of a second. There were cameras at that point, it used to have a shutter speed of 1/6000th of a second. Today, there are cameras which can give you much more higher shutter speed, though very rarely it is required. I think even for a fridging any image which is of a movement like a dancer or some bhala player or some football player or anything, jumping business, running business, in which the speed is involved, 1/1000th of a second is enough. But if you have a 2000, nothing like that. 1000 is a good enough shutter speed to fridge any frame. I would say even 500th of a second is good enough. Sometime 1/250th of a second you will get a sharp image, but 1000 is a maximum good enough. But still some of the cameras has a little more higher the shutter speed. It comes in a slower side. Also there's a particular button called which we in the shutter we call bulk B. What does it mean by bulk? Bulk means you keep pressing the button as long as you want by your idea, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, whatever you want, and once you release, the shutter would be closed. So bulk used to be an option for the night photography. Many a time people will use the bulk button also. So that was another button. Adjustable aperture. The lens, it is on the lens, not on the camera body. It is on the lens. Aperture is being mentioned, which is basically a mechanism, blades, which will control the amount of light which will enter after passing through the lens. So that amount of light, we will talk about the aperture a little more detail later on. So aperture is another thing on the lens body, not on the camera body. So 1.4, 2, 2.84, 5.6, 8, 6, 8, 11, 16, 22. These are the number which are double or half. Double of 1.4 is 2.8. In between there will be 2. Double of 2 is a 4. 4 double is 8. In between 2.4. Double of 5.6. So double half is there. So normally we call it as a one stop. From 1.4 when we go to 2, it is a one stop. 2 to 2.8, it is a two stop. That's how we call it as a in the photography language. Some people who are hearing these terms first time, they need to take a pen, go to Google, figure it out some video tutorials which will talk about shutter speed, talk about aperture. Then he'll give you much more better understanding what I'm talking about. Then the lens, everybody knows, a body device for controlling film alignment and advancement. I have told you that those lever buttons, etc., etc. Okay, so viewfinder, a very, very important thing. Viewfinder, what exactly is there inside the viewfinder? So there is something called ground glass. It is a ground glass on which an image will be formed, and that you can see through the viewfinder. So ground glass image will be formed and you will see through the viewfinder. There are two different things. Ground glass is inside the viewfinder from where you are able to watch the image. So image will be formed on the ground glass, and through the viewfinder you could see it. Okay, and you could do the focusing. You could figure it out what is the other settings of the camera are also displayed inside. All those, whether it's underexposed, overexposed, shutter speed, film speed, all those settings would be seen inside the viewfinder. And generally, as I said, there is a ground glass where the image will be formulated. So this is Pentax K1000, very popular brand at one given point of a time. Now you could see this bonnet. It's a very, very important thing. In cinema, this become very important. There is PL mount. There's a PL mount. Every camera has a mount. So when you go and buy the lens for a particular camera, they will ask which mount you have. A model is one thing, company is another thing, and mount is another thing. So mount you have to match while buying the lenses. So if you're buying, say for example, any camera, Canon 5D Mark IV or something else, if you wanted to buy the third-party lenses, you need to figure it out which mount it has. So mount will make the lens little more costly. Suppose for a particular series of a lens, if you buy the PL mount, it will be a little more expensive, because PL mount is a standard mount for cinema lenses. Some company has a different other mounts also, which are economical. They are also cinema lenses, but PL mount is the oldest mount for the cinema lenses. That's why PL mount is kind of a standardization. But as I said, that there are other mounts are also available in the market. We will talk about them later on. So today is just the introduction of these various factors. Mirror. I have asked this question very often to not all of you, but some of you. So there is a mirror inside the single lens reflex camera, which is placed at a 45 degree from where the image get reflected up into the pentaprism, and then you get to see it in a ground glass to the viewfinder. So this mirror is specially made mirror. There are two important things about this mirror. A, it is optically corrected mirror. Optically corrected mirror. That's the point number one. The mirror which you use at a house is not optically corrected. So sometimes it may have a distortion. That's the one thing. So optical correction of this mirror is very, very important. B, this mirror is very thin. Very, very thin. Why? Because it has to flip. If it is heavy, then it will not be able to flip up and then let the light enter into the lens. So this mirror is made of a very lighter material glass, which is of a very, very thin glass, I would say, very thin glass, which is optically corrected. Thin glass which is optically corrected. Your house mirror could be a thick glass, depend upon 5 mm, 10 mm, whatever mm you want. In the market, you can get 10 mm glass also, you can get 5 mm also, you can get 2 mm also. But even if it is a 10 mm, it may not be optically corrected. So optically corrected glass is an expensive glass. Okay. How do you find out a glass is optically corrected? I would give you a plain glass. Plain glass means a sheet of a glass, and I ask you, is it an optically corrected glass? If you recollect your student days of microscope, you will put something over there and try to do some small experiment. That is the optically corrected glass. So how do you find out is it optically corrected glass or not? A, it will be thin, first of all. The thickness of the glass would add some distortion into the thing. So if you're looking for an optically corrected glass, it has to be thin, first of all, so that distortion would not be added into the thing. So if a static image is there, if I move some glass, I should not feel the image is also moving, because the glass movement should not affect the movement of the image. So if I give you a glass and ask you, is it an optically corrected glass? How do you find out? You will move the glass in front of any object, and if the object remain there, and if the glass movement cannot be felt, it is an optically corrected glass. If it is not optically corrected glass, you may have a feel of distortion. So that's the reason one. Reason number two, the coating of the mirror is at the back end of the household mirror which you use in the early morning to comb your hair or look at your faces. Here the mirror coating is on the front. It has a front coated mirror. So that's why it is, as a precautionary measure, you are being told not to touch the mirror. Why? Because it has a coating on the front surface. In the house, the mirror you have is a coating on the back side. So why there is a coating on the front? That's a question one can ask. Because if the image would enter inside the glass, then it will travel with the thickness of the glass and then will bounce from the back side. So it will add the distortion, where even the best of the optical corrected glass would add a distortion in the image. And for a photography purpose, or for that matter, cinema also has a mirror. Earlier used to be a mirror which has a glass over there. That there were a variety of mirrors available. So this mirror should not add any distortion in the image, and hence the surface is front coated, not the back coated, which is used at the household. So that's the two primary difference: optical correction and surface. The distortion, basically the distortion and thickness is very lighter, so that it can flip very easily without any trouble. So these are the two basic difference. Mirror also comes into a plastic. Sometime you should also know, now I am talking about it. So sometime you will see some dancer floor is there. So plastic mirror will also be exactly like a mirror. But only thing is, it will not break. If you jump on that plastic mirror, it will not break. Glass mirror will break, but plastic mirror will not break. So sometime when you are shooting inside a cave where you can't take this heavy mirror which will break, you use this plastic mirror. Only thing is that you should have a surface should be very straight. Otherwise, it will give the patch of light and distortion of the image. Normally, people don't use it. Only for the virtual feel of mirror. If you want to give somewhere, then you use the plastic mirror. Otherwise, plastic mirrors are not used. So I just thought it should tell you. So shutter release button is there. We have already discussed. Shutter release button, it will release the shutter, and then you will hear the tuck, and that's it. So shutter release dial, already you can set the shutter speed over there, 30, 60, whatever shutter speed you want. So you could see here, one little enlargement is there. So you could see the 2, 4, 8, 15, 30, and then 60x, and then 125. What is this X business? And it is very specifically marked. Can anybody tell me quickly? You've gone to sleep.
Yes, sir, I know that.
What is that?
सर एक्चुअली ये 60x इसलिए लिखा हुआ है जब कभी अपन फिल्म कैमरा यूज कर रहे हैं और इसकी बैटरी खत्म हो जाती है तो ये 60 जो शटर है उस पे वो यूज हो सकता है.
No.
It is a bulb, sir. May give a guess? It is a bulb speed of the like when you use a flash speed, it is 1/60th of a second. So here it is marked. I'm guessing. I'm not sure.
It is quite close, but not exactly.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. This is called sync speed. If you are using a flash, with this particular camera, you cannot use more than 60th of a second if you are using a flash. So that is the maximum shutter speed you can use with this camera if you are using a flash. So that was one of the feature some of the camera has, that you could go to 1/125th of a second if you are using a flash. So that's a point. It is marked over there red because you cannot sync. What will happen if you use 125? So there will be a black stripe. There will be a black stripe in the photograph, and all the photograph would not come clear. So if you want all the photograph to come clear, your shutter speed has to be lesser than 60th of a second. This is called a sync speed. It is also called a sync speed. That's why I prefer to talk about a little bit of a history. So sync speed of this camera is 60th. More than that, you can't shoot with the flash. Okay. So come again. Here you could see 125, right? Why this 125 is marked red? Because with this particular model of a camera, I don't know what model it was because you can't figure it out from the dial. The shutter speed where the flash can be synced, you can use the 1/25th of a second. Okay. So that this red mark would help you to do it. Then this is aperture and all that is being mentioned. F-stop, I have already talked about 2, 2.8, 1.4. Higher the opening of a lens, 1.4 is their opening of a lens, more expensive it would be. Okay. So that is one thing you need to remember. If you're buying any lens, if you're buying a 50 mm lens, for example, highest opening, widest opening of a lens is 2.8, and another one is assuming a 1.8. 1.8 lens would be more expensive than the 2.8. So that's a one reason. It has to do something with the mechanism inside the lens, and hence to get the maximum widest opening, we call it as a fast lenses. Fast lenses don't have a speed of 100 km, 200 km. When you say fast lenses, what does it mean? It means the lens has a widest opening could be 1.4. It could be 2, could be also a fast lens. If you are using a 800 mm tele lens, your widest opening would be 4.5 or maybe 5.6. But if a lens of 800 mm has a aperture of f2, so it is a fast lens, because 800 mm, I never heard of a lens of f2. Normally it is 4.5, 5.6, but there are lenses where you could get the f2 also with the 800 mm telephoto lens, and then the price would be obnoxiously high. So that's the meaning of fast lenses. Okay, so this is something. Here you could see all these radius dial is there. The ASA is the film speed. We will talk about a little more in detail later on. So here you could see the 25 ASA, 50 ASA, 100, 200, 400, 800, 16, 320, 6400. Now there was a time in a still photography, you will not find easily the 400 ASA film. 400 you will still find, but 800 you will not get it. So why the hell they have mentioned the 1600 ASA when the film is not available in the market? Why they have mentioned the 3200 degree when the film is not available in the market? If there is no film, why they have mentioned the 3200 degree? Anybody will say anything? 36 boys and few girls. My question is, earlier high speed film in the still photography days were not available. More than 800 ASA was almost impossible. So when the film is not available of more than 800 ASA, why there is a 1600 and 3200 ASA is mentioned here?
Sir, can I guess?
Yeah.
Sir, so we can actually like rate our film at like a different.
We can
pull the.
Not clear. Your voice.
Yeah, you can hear me, sir.
Yeah, I can.
Yes. So actually, we can actually push or pull the film. Okay. So if it is rated at 400 ASA, we can actually push it to 800, 1600.
But why you would like to push it?
So suppose if I have a 400 ASA film and I'm shooting at night or some darker place, I might want to push the film to a greater ASA to get more detail.
What's your name?
So that Parth Shah, sir.
Okay. Say again what you said.
So basically, if I have a film of 400 ASA and if I am shooting at a darker place and I don't have a higher rated ASA film, I can actually use this from this dial. I can actually use 800, 1600 or so on, so that I can capture more details in a darker environment.
But then it will be underexposing. If you are using a 400 ASA film,
right?
Say for example 1600. So you are underexposing true stop. So it could be darker actually, because the actual film is not 1600 ASA.
Right.
Actual film is 400 is only. So you are assuming that it is a 1600 ASA.
Yes.
Right. So
yes.
My question is, when the film is only 400 ASA and you are assuming that it is 1600 ASA, so it will give the true stop underexposed image. So what is the advantage?
Sir,
anybody else? 35 people. You want to go to FTII, right?
Sir, no.
Okay.
सर सर ऐसा लगेगा दिन में भी अगर सर मतलब फिल्मिंग करेंगे तो सर उसको रात नाइट का फील दे सकते हैं.
Wrong. Don't waste the time. Anybody else?
Sir, to control the night in the day. Sir,
Wrong.
to
Next.
So maybe because for a longer exposure time.
Longer exposure time means what? So what will happen? My question is, your film is actually 400 ASA. You are underexposing by mistake or by consciously. It is a consciously. You are underexposing consciously, assuming that the film is 1600 degrees. So 2 stop you are underexposing. So image would be 2 stop darker. So why you would do it? Somebody said we can push or pull the film. So what is the pushing pulling business? Why you would do it to expose a film 2 stop under? Why you would like to do it?
Sir, to
Sir-
control the exposure.
So that somebody control the exposure is fine. You have you in order to gain the more, in order to find a film which should be 1600 ASA, that film is not available in the market in your country at least. So you are underexposing 2 stop. Correct? If a film is of 400 ASA and you are underexposing 2 stop, so you are getting an image in the negative which is 2 stop underexposed.
Yes, sir.
So where are you getting the detail? You're not
so
getting the detail.
Sir, but while developing also we need to change the development times, right?
Correct.
To compensate for it.
Correct. So
Yeah.
we call it as a underexpose. That the idea is called you underexpose the negative and overdevelop into the
Correct.
time of processing.
Yes.
So that is called pushing and pulling. So you underexpose the negative, and at the time of processing, you overdevelop it. There is a mechanism by hit and trial. People knows it. If you have underexposed 2 stop, you need to give an instruction to the laboratory that I have 2 stop underexposed. So you need to pull the film so that it will give the image which is much more better than the underexposed. So what is the harm of over processing? There is some harm. So harm is that the image will become grainy. Image will become grainy. That would be the harm if you have shoot on a 1600 and you process normally. So you will not get the grainy image. So only harm is that during the time of underexposed over processing, your image would become grainy. Sometime to gain certain effects, there are films in which people have deliberately underexposed 3 stop and overdeveloped it in the time of processing, whether it is a black and white or is a color. Generally in a black and white, people have done it to gain the grainy effect. If you really wanted to gain the grainy effect into a film, sometimes people deliberately underexposed and overdeveloped it. Okay, so that's the purpose of this dial business. Even if the film were not available, they were mentioned for that. So ASA dial, you can set whatever the film is there, and accordingly, camera will calculate the exposure. So that's it. So we'll go to advanced lever. All these buttons are already being mentioned. Backside, you see automatic aperture coupling lever. What is the automatically coupling lever? Here you could see alignment index for mounting. Then you could see white button. What is the mounting business? If you do not match this button with the dot on the lens, then it will not, locking will happen. So when you are mounting the lens on there, you have to properly do it. Everything is being given depth of field scale. What is the depth of field scale is, I would talk about that a little more in detail. Distance scale, focusing ring, all these things are, everything should be clear. Here you see some small buttons over there. What are these buttons are all about? Today particularly, and when the electronic cameras came, when electronics got introduced into the camera, earlier this Nikon particularly for the manual camera. Inside there was no electronic button. So FM, M stand for manual. FM means it's a manual camera. Nikon FM, FM2, then Nikon FA was another model, and then Nikon F3. F3 has a electronics. Okay. So electronic came later on into the camera, and then it became more expensive. So all these buttons were to control the automatically aperture, basically the aperture, and hence the exposure. So primarily to control that, and also to some extent, if your flash is dedicated, flash will also control the aperture sometimes, because if you need more light or less light, there's a combination of aperture plus artificial light. Both the combination would happen, and then accordingly flash will calculate what aperture it needs, and it will give the instruction to the lens, okay, I want this much opening of the aperture, because I would be throwing this much of a light and I need this much opening. So to give the instruction to the lens via your flash unit was very, very complex mechanism at some point, and dedicated flashes used to come, and simple flashes also used to come. So whenever we'll talk about the flash photography, we would talk at that point. I'm just right now mentioning all these button business, what these are supposed to do. So here you could see all these apertures are there. Then this depth of field thing is also mentioned. Here you will not be able to figure it out, depth of field, very properly. There's a separate chart comes over there, that if you are shooting at this particular aperture with this particular distance, with this particular lens, at this distance, this much area in front and this much area in the back would be in the acceptably sharp focus. Okay, so this table is there, you consult that table and you should be able to figure it out. I also told you in still cameras there used to be a button called depth of field preview button. What is a preview button? In a still camera, when the lens is being mounted, it normally remain always on the widest opening. Why? When you're looking through a viewfinder, if I ask you a question, what is the opening now when you're looking through a viewfinder? If you have set at the aperture priority or shutter priority, it is always widest opening. Why? Anybody?
So that can view the image from the viewfinder, sir.
If the opening is not widest, you will still be able to see the image.
Sir, but then also the depth of field will alter, na? If we have a wide.
My question is, try to understand the question, then try to answer. The question is, when you have not set the aperture, suppose you want to take a photograph manually, okay, and you want to shoot at f11. So you have set the aperture at f11. But right now, inside the lens, opening is still f1.4 or 2, whatever the widest opening is there. It is not f11, though you have set it at f11. Are you getting my point? So why the lens in the beginning, when you're looking through a viewfinder to do the focusing, it is the widest opening? That is my question. Use your common sense.
सर लाइट पूरी आएगी इसलिए मतलब क्लियर पिक्चर दिखेगा इसलिए.
So that the ground glass should have the maximum light entering inside the camera, so that the brightness of the image at the ground glass should be there. So to get the brightest image on the ground glass, your widest opening is kept all the time, irrespective of the fact what aperture you want to shoot. When you want to focus it, widest opening would be there. So when you press the shutter, what happens? When you press the shutter, since you have told the camera over there at f11, the aperture would come at f11 after your shutter is being released, and then only f11 would give the amount of light whichever is required, which you have told the camera, and then again it will become widest open. Are you getting my point? So even if you are shooting manually at a shutter speed of 1/120th of a second and your aperture is 11, at the time of focusing, aperture is not 11. At the time of focusing, whatever widest opening it has, 1.4 or 2, it is that aperture is there, so that you can see the image very clearly. Only when the shutter is released, the aperture before that, shutter is before the aperture is before the shutter. Aperture is inside the lens and shutter is with the camera body. So when you press the shutter, before that, aperture would come at f11 or 8, whatever setting you have done, and then shutter would be released, whatever shutter speed you have done, and image will be formed in the back. Okay, so this is a small thing you need to remember. There are so many small things which are very important for you to remember it. Aperture ring, all these things I have told you. What is this focusing ring? So these are the basic things. I have taken almost 1 hour to explain to you basic thing, but the basics are basic. There are a few things you were not able to answer when I asked a question, despite the fact many of you are practicing photography. So any specific question I can quickly answer and move further. Nobody has a question? Good.
Sir.
Yeah.
Pressure plate क्या है?
Pressure plate क्या है? Okay, I'll tell you. Pressure plate is a very important part into the cinema motion picture camera and also in the still. So it is basically when your negative is there inside the cassette, it becomes crumbled, it becomes round. If you take a negative out, it will become crumbled. It is a rounded kind of a thing. But when you're forming an image on the picture negative, the negative has to be absolute like a plain paper, flat. To make the picture negative flat, there was a pressure plate which has a spring mechanism backside. You could press it and you can feel that this is a flexible plate, and it will press the picture negative flat so that your image formed on the negative should be, in a one sentence, if I say, pressure plate is a plate which will make the negative flat at the time of exposing. That is the job of a picture negative. Absolutely straight. If that is not there, the image formed on the negative will be unsharp. Okay, got it? Next. Everybody knows, so fine. We'll move to next thing. I would pick up another PPT.
I have a question, sir.
Okay, quick.
Will we be discussing these things?
Wait. Let me just first open the another thing, because I would get. 1 second. Let me just do my first thing and then I will answer your question. Film speed lens show. Okay. I would talk about the lenses now, and I would answer your question before I move into that. Okay. So I go here. I go here. One second only. Let me continue with the thing. Screen share. Go here. Share. Okay. So now ask the question, please.
I was asking, will we discuss these things in detail later on?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Thank you.
We will be discussing more than you can think of in your life. Okay. So, lens. Very important, very specific topic which we are talking. Can we just take a 5-minute break and then come back?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Break and we'll come back.
Okay.
Okay. Nobody would discuss anything with anybody. I'm telling you why. Everybody has to take a pain to go to YouTube and type what is different parts of the camera, blah, 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 blah. Whatever you don't understand, there's always a video over there. Okay. So whatever discussion you have to do, Try to discuss with the Google, YouTube. You will find many videos. If you take little pain, you will understand it. If you won't take a pain, nothing would going to happen. So I'm coming back to the lenses. So here we start. Most important thing, if you go in the market, first thing people would ask, what is your name? You will say, my name is Naresh Khanna, Naresh Malhotra, Naresh Sharma. Okay. So when you say, I have a lens, first thing you say, what is the focal length of the lens? Acha, kaun sa lens hai? Kaun sa lens means, does not mean which company it is. Which lens means, what is the focal length of the lens? There is a different name also for that. It's called normal lens. Some will use a telephoto lens. Telephoto is a type of lenses which could be 100 mm, 200 mm, 300 mm, etc. So focal length is the major characteristic of a lens. When you say which lens you have, you will say I have a 135 mm. This mm is the unit. The way you go to the market and say 2 kilogram sabji de do, so kilogram is the unit of sabji. 1 kilo khana hai, 2 kilogram sabji chahiye. What is when you drive 80 kilometer, 60 kilometer, it is a kilometer is a unit. So when we talk about the focal length, it is a way of specifying what exactly is the focal length in terms of millimeter, mm. Okay. So we say normal lens. What is the meaning of a normal lens? How this word normal came from where it came? So normally it is approximation to the human eye. What human eye sees, a lens should also be able to see. So people who are opticians, who are into the manufacturing of the lenses and designing of the lenses, they came out with a lens which is approximately closer to the human being, which is not a fixed kind of a focal length. So normally we say 50 mm is a normal lens. So why we say 50 mm is a normal lens? Because it's an angle of view. We will talk about a little more detail in discussion. Okay, a lens which is between this and this focal length would be known as a normal lens. So 35 mm negative of 50 mm lens is called a normal lens. But not exactly 50. It could be 49, it could be 47. So there is a range. Always remember, in a normal lens, normal is also a very, very vague word. Vague means, अच्छा कैसे हो? ठीक ठाक. ठीक ठाक क्या होता है? Okay. So it's a vague word to define normal lens. So it is an approximation to the human eye. That's why we call it as normal lens. 50 mm lens could be a telephoto lens for a different format. We will talk about that soon. So for 35 mm camera with a 36 into 24 mm format, this is the length and width of the negative, and a diagonal is 43.3. That's why a lens having a focal length of 43.3 would be known as a normal lens, technically to be more appropriate. But as I said, that's the approximation. So somewhere between 40 and 50 mm, we call it as a 50 mm is easy to remember. 50 mm is not too much of a difference between 40 through 250. Toward the telephoto side, in the wider side, it becomes more important, but toward the tele side, it is not too much. So any lens which is between 40 and 50, we call it as a normal lens. When we use normal lens, iska matlab 50 hai. Then focal length between 40 and 50, as I just said, are considered as a normal lens for 35 format. So plus minus, let's say plus minus 7 or 8, 50 is called as a normal lens. For 35 format, we are always talking about in that sense of the term because it is approximately plus minus of the diagonal length, which is here clearly mentioned 43.3. So normal lens of a particular format has a focal length approximately equal to the length of the diagonal of the image. That's why we call it as a normal lens. Medium format. Now there are various formats into the still photography, and similarly there were different format for the cinematography also when the negative was the type. So people who were doing more professional work, professional means industrial work, fashion photography, industrial shoot where the large negative was required because the image will be blown up for the hoardings. for some exhibition or something like that. So for that purpose, a medium format was more suitable because image is going to be enlarged. If you are going to use 8x10, 10x12, 12x15, 35 negative was good enough. But if you are going to blow up, say 8 feet by 20 feet picture negative, then people would prefer to use the medium format. So generally, term applies to any film size between 35 mm and a large format, which is 4.5 and Cinar. We will talk about the large format cameras also. So in between 35 mm versus 4.5. So there used to be a sheet film. It will not come into a cassette for the large format. Large format will have a single plate, each and every plate. Every plate would be there, single plate would be there in large format. But for a medium format, there used to be a cassette of a certain number of exposure, which will go into a magazine. Magazine is a housing in which you could put your cassette over there. So so these are the various formats available over there. I have made a PPT of this, and if you could read it carefully, let me read it for you people. 135 mm format. The dimension is 24 into 36. First, second, third is a 35 mm format first. So 43.2327 is the size of the diagonal, and accordingly 50 mm lens would be known as a normal lens. 45 would also be known as a normal lens. I have also told 58 would also be known as a normal lens. But in a day-to-day practice, people would prefer to call 50 mm lens as a normal lens. Okay. Then there was a 120 format. The nomenclature by which we will address them as a 120 format. So 6 by 4.5 was one size of the negative. Then there was a 6 by 6, then there was 6 by 7, and there was a 6 by 9. So different kind of film format were available. So accordingly, the dimension of the film image was 56 into 45, 56 into 56, 56 into 68, 56 into 84. Now, one thing if you have noticed carefully, 56 is fixed, which means the width of the negative. So 120 format cassette will have a fixed width, which will go to different kind of format available, where the height of the negative would change. Accordingly, the size would change. So you could see here, the image diagonal is 71 mm, then there's a 79, then the 88, 109, and normal length of the focal length would be 75 mm, having a image size of 6:4.5. 6:6, 80 mm would be a normal lens. 6 by 9, 105 mm would be a normal lens. Pay attention carefully. Not 50 mm, but 125 mm could be a normal lens. Right? And then large format like Cinar. Cinar was a Switzerland company, very popular company in India. People who are really wealthy and well off and big industrial photographer will have the Cinar camera, which is of a bellow mechanism in between, very complicated in terms of having it. So Cinar was the popular model made in Switzerland, and I will show you the pictures. So which particular model will have what kind of picture negative size? Okay, so that's a question. So this is a size of roll 120 format. So you can see the width is constant. So Hasselblad from Sweden. Hasselblad from Sweden, a very big company, very expensive cameras. You could see here, it's a large format camera. And then there was another company called Mamiya, 645, another model. Then there used to be another camera which I have just told you, Cinar. So Cinar used to look like this. So you could see the various knobs. It has this bellow mechanism. It has this lens which could flip left, right, and there's some kind of angle mechanism is there. So this was a little complicated camera. You need to really learn it properly, and very expensive also. So many people who are doing the industrial photography would use this. You can't hold it in a hand and shoot it. Okay, It will always be on a tripod. I have never seen somebody holding a sonar camera and taking a picture. No. Mamiya and other, yes, you can. But this camera was always on the tripod. So these are the normal lens we had just discussed. And now we come to the wide angle lens. So MCQ question can be formulated easily when they say write a short note on normal lens. So now you know what you are going to write. You will write about all these various format. You need to remember this various size 56 by 45, 56 by 57, 56 by 68. These number you need to remember and you should be able to write it. If you write it more elaborately, normal lens, you can't say normal lens is a lens which has a focal length of 50 mm is called normal lens. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. No. If it is a 5 marks, then you need to write the more detail about the various format and which format, which lens would be a normal lens. Okay, guys. Wide angle lens, as I said, the focal length would determine whether it's a wide angle or not. So for 35 negative, a lens which is lesser than 35 or 28 mm, ideally 28 mm is considered as a good thing. 32 is also a wide angle lens. 35 mm is also wide angle lens because we have defined 50 mm as a normal lens. So 35, 32 mm, 35 mm give you enough wide angle. 28 would give you a little more wide angle. Angle of view would become larger and larger. The wide angle it goes, and the lens would also become smaller. So if you go and buy a 32 mm wide angle lens and if you go and buy a 50 mm lens from the same company of the same series, 32 will be more expensive than the 50 mm. More the wider, more expensive it becomes. Why? Because there is a mechanism which makes the lens costlier. So 35 mm lens or lesser than that is considered a wide angle lens for a 35 mm format lens. So again and again I'm saying, for some reason, if there would pattern changes, if there would be a fill in the blanks, or if there is an MCQ, technical MCQ of 20 marks, then you are stuck unless you don't have a clear-cut understanding. But we will also formulate some descriptive question, whatever I am discussing today. Answer I am already given to you. The only thing is you need to take a pain to write your own answers so that your answer will not match with somebody else. Otherwise, it is a copy and paste. So coming to the extreme wide angle lens, there's a wide angle lens and there's something called extreme wide angle lens. So there used to be lenses till 8 mm, and it is also called as a fisheye lens because fish can see from here to there. So angle of view is very, very large, and hence a fish can see from left to right. That's why it will give a distorted image. So normally, if you don't want a distorted image, you will not go less than 20 mm. 20 mm is considered as the widest, but you can find 9.8 mm lens also in the widest range, and will give the distorted image. Corner would be black, or if you're closer to the subject, image would be distorted. So wide angle lens comes in both fixed focal length and zoom variety. As I said earlier also, in the wide angle lens, there could be a shorter zoom of 20 mm to 35 mm. 20 to 35 mm, a short zoom lens would also be available. Like in a telephoto series, there is a zoom lens from 80 to 200 mm. So all these variety of lenses of zoom lens come. So short zoom lens is also available in terms of the wide angle side, because if somebody is a photojournalist, he will not shoot the close-ups of the people. He needs the short zoom lens, and generally for the photojournalism, short zoom lens is very helpful nature. If you are a wildlife photographer, you need the zoom lens into the higher telephoto side, because you will not go close to some tiger and take a picture. Okay, you will sit into some corner over there, hiding yourself into a branches and taking a picture of these creatures. So sometime zoom lens, these fixed focal length lenses are also known as a block lenses. Block lenses is a category, like zoom lens is a category, block lens is a category. Block lens means a lens having a fixed focal length, whether it is 28 mm, whether it is 30 mm, whether it is 50 mm, whether it is 80 mm, 200 mm. Any lens which has a one particular fixed focal length is known as a block lens. A lens which has a variable focal length is known as a zoom lens. So that's a basic difference between block lens. Block lens is also known as a prime lenses. Okay, this is another name for the same kind of a thing. So block lens or zoom lens, prime lens or zoom lenses. So these are the range 28 to 70 mm, 70 to 200 mm. As I said, the shorter zoom lens would be also 20 to 34 mm. Arri used to manufacture into the cinema variety of short zoom lenses also. Same with the other companies. So you could see this is a fisheye mm lens, 17 to 40 mm. 17 is almost like a fisheye. Almost like a fisheye. And 40 is the highest you could go in the shorter zoom. So this is a small range zoom lens, 70 to 40 mm, available in the market. You could see this company. I'm not able to read it properly, but this look like Tokina or something like that. Okay, we will talk about that also, various companies which manufacture the lenses. Because this last year, if you recollect, there was a technical question meant for everybody. Pick the odd one out, in which they had asked the question about these projector making companies. Cube Cinema. Cube is projection making company. Scrabble is a projection making company which make the projectors. And Christie, Barco, these are the companies which are manufacturing the cinema projector, not your homemade projector which you see at your homes. Okay, they are bloody expensive, very huge, very fat, very heavy projector which cannot be taken in a hand. You need to put them, install them. That's it. So these are the companies. So the question was which is odd one out? MP3, Scrabble, Cube, or UFO. So odd one is MP3 because MP3 is a format and the rest are all companies. So, but it is still easy to figure it out. Had I been making a question, I would be asking this question: Christie, Barco, and Scrabble, and some other shit. And which one is odd? If you don't know these Christie, etc., then you would pick up some wrong answer. So you're supposed to remember all these names: Christie, Barco. These are the two main cinema manufacturing projector companies. So telephoto lens, 500 mm, you can see the more the telephoto, the longer it becomes. And hence there is a knob in between which will support the lens. So that's why you will see two railings outside, particularly for the cinema lenses, which are very, very long. And that long part cannot be enough hold by the barrel itself. So it needs an extra support, and extra support is being hooked over there. And then that's how you can manage the length of the zoom lens. So there's a support system over there. So angle of view, as I said, that the wide angle you go towards it has a more angle of view to view it. And here you could see the diagram very easily. So normal lens has a lower angle of view, wide angle lens has a larger angle of view, and telephoto has a normal angle of view. So here, if I really want to confuse you, I can make a very interesting MCQ question which is here. So if I say if a lens has a angle of view called 27 degree for a 35 mm negative, so will that lens would be a normal lens, telephoto lens, or a wide angle lens? This is my question. So here you can easily see angle of view is 15 degree. So it means it is a narrow watching. Narrow watching means the lens has to be a telephoto lens. So at least that much you should be able to understand. In lower angle of view, telephoto lens, wider angle of view, larger number of angle of view, 90 degree, 80 degree, 113 degree. It means it is a wide angle lens. So you should be able to connect angle of view with the focal length. Not exactly, but in a very generic fashion. If I say if a lens has an angle of view 10 degree for a 35 mm lens, will it be a normal lens, telephoto lens, or a wide angle? At least you should be able to figure out that much. So the angle of view changes, so will the expense of the background. So you will see behind the subject. So because of that, the background look compressed. In a telephoto lens, background look compressed. Why? Because angle of view has changed. So these are the various possibilities in the MCQ. They can ask you angle of view changes. So too will the expense of background you will see behind your subject. Yes. There could be a multiple choice of yes and no. Which among the following is true about angle of view? For example, so from here I could formulate a question easily and confuse you very easily. Depend upon the examiner how horribly he decides to make the question paper. So far, question paper is not tough. A person like me would sit down to make a question paper, it will be tough, for sure. Even if you are listening to my lecture, does not mean you will be able to answer each and everything over there. I will not teach you everything. I would teach you many things, but I would not teach you everything. Okay. So last, wide angle fisheye lenses, you could see it over here. So as I mentioned about the zoom lenses, I would also talk about the single touch and double touch. Anybody would like to say what is single touch and what is the double touch business? Any wise men around? Everybody has gone to sleep. Okay. Single touch zoom lens is a zoom lens in which to zoom in and zoom out in a still photography would also have a focusing ring. It's the same ring which will also, if you move it a little further or inside, you could zoom in or zoom out to whatever focal length you want. And with the same ring, you can do the focusing also. Am I clear? Is it clear to everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, and there were another kind of zoom lens which has a different ring for the focusing and another ring for the zooming in and zoom out. Both rings were different. Okay. Such kind. So my question is, wake up now, everybody. Those who think they know everything, particularly those people. So, single touch and double touch kind of zoom lenses were made in the still photography category, but not for the cinema. Cinema always had the double touch zoom lens. Why? 35 people are here. Let me see who are the wise people. If I would set up a question paper, I would ask this question, which you will not be able to answer.
सर सिनेमा में मतलब जूम करने के टाइम फोकस चला जाएगा, इसलिए अलग से फोकसिंग रहता है, तो फोकस करेक्ट करने के लिए।
ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है कि फोकस चला जाएगा। फोकस अगर स्टिल में नहीं जा सकता तो वहां पे भी नहीं जाएगा। जूम इन और जूम आउट उससे हो सकता है, बट यस द प्रिसीजन इज वेरी मच रिक्वायर्ड। In cinema, you can't fool around because the image will be enlarged too much. Image would be enlarged. ये आंसर किसने दिया अभी?
सोईकांत गिरी।
हाँ जी?
सोईकांत गिरी।
सुहीकांत।
सोईकांत SAIKAT।
ओके। आगे?
गिरी GIRI।
तो सुहीकांत गिरी, you are quite close. But the most important thing is the blown up. थोड़ा बहुत नेगेटिव, जैसे आप जब फोकसिंग कर रहे होते हैं तो it is not always 100% focus, right? Because there is enough depth of field. But since in cinema the image will be blown up too much, and hence a precision of focus is very much required, and hence they do not want to take a risk, and that's why there is a double touch zoom lens. Because also there is another mistake can happen with a focus puller, that he will start also zooming out or zooming in while the cinema cameraman don't want. So there are two reasons. One, a precision of the focus has to be there, and second, the zoom in, zoom out should not happen by mistake by the focus puller while he is pulling the focus. So two reasons are there. So focus pulling should do only the focus pulling only, not the zooming and zooming out while the shot is going on. And second is the precision of the focus, so that because the image is going to be blown up almost 200, 300 times. If you calculate the size of the screen and you calculate the size of the negative, you will realize how if a projector is going to project the image with a throw of 40 feet, for example. Normally it is 70 feet, 80 feet cinema halls. But if it is a 70 feet size of, say for example, 30 feet by 120 feet or 100 feet, how many times a negative is going to be blown up? So if the image is unsharp, your negative will be blown up too much. Okay. So sharpness is the one reason. And second is, while my shot is going on in cinema, by mistake, if it is the same ring, focus puller could also zoom in or zoom out by mistake. So that mistake should not happen. And hence, there is a separate rings are made for zooming in and zooming out and for the focusing, so that focus should also be in sharp focus. So this is in brief for today. It's 7:36. Last 25 minutes or 30 minutes I keep for question and answer. You can ask any stupid question. If you don't know, you can ask intelligent question. I can answer whatever I have taught till now.
सर मेरा एक स्टूपिड क्वेश्चन है.
बोलिए.
सर जो सिंगल टच है ना, ये थोड़ा समझ में नहीं आया. लाइक मेरे पास DSLR है 1200 D है कैनन का, उसमें वो डबल टच है, ठीक है, उसके जो लेंस है. तो सर मेरे को ये सिंगल टच समझ में नहीं आ रहा कि इसमें मैं फोकस भी करूंगा. और
कि आप उस जमाने में पैदा नहीं हुए थे जिस जमाने में लेंसेज हुआ करते थे. अभी वो लेंस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग बंद होने हो चुके हैं. वो वाले लेंसेज मैन्युफैक्चर होना बंद हो चुका है. तो उसमें क्या होता था, एक ही रिंग होता था. वो उसी रिंग को आगे और पीछे करके आप जो है जूम इन और जूम आउट फोकल लेंथ अपना सेट कर लेते, एक ही रिंग.
हाँ सर, ठीक है, वो समझ आ गया.
उसी रिंग को फोकसिंग के लिए इस्तेमाल करते थे. वही रिंग. अगर आप लेंस मेरा ये है, इफ ओके यूज एक्सिस वाइज, इफ आई एम मूविंग द जूम लेंस इनटू टुवर्ड्स द लेंस, into the lens, into the horizontally, then either I am zooming in or I am zooming out, whatever focal length I need. Once I said that, in still photography, while you're taking a shot, you can't zoom in, zoom out. Okay, so your focal length is fixed now.
Okay.
So now focal length is fixed, but you need to set the focus also, whether it's a 10 feet or 20 feet. So you set the focus with the same ring by moving the way you move now. How do you set the focus? By moving the ring, rotating the ring. So you could still rotate the ring, and here also you could axis wise on parallel to the ground, you could move the ring further.
Okay, okay sir.
The length you need in terms of zoom in or zoom out.
Okay, okay sir. तो फोकस के लिए बस मुझे रिंग को घुमाना है और जूम के लिए आगे पीछे करना है.
जैसे अभी घुमा रहे हो वैसे रिंग को घुमाना है. जो भी फोकसिंग डिस्टेंस घूमता था. बट अगर आपको जूम 58 mm का जूम लेंस से 70 पे जाना है, तो आप 70 पे अभी क्या करते हैं, आप रिंग को घुमाते हैं.
हाँ जी.
रिंग को उसी तरीके से घुमाते हैं जैसे फोकस को घुमाते हैं.
हाँ जी.
उस जमाने में वो लेंस का जो रिंग था उसको आगे या पीछे ऐसे आप अपना फोकल लेंथ सेट करते थे, जो भी आपको फोकल लेंथ सेट करना होता था. दैट इज कॉल्ड सिंगल टच, डबल टच. सिंगल टच जो जूम लेंस होता था वो सस्ता होता था. डबल टच जो जूम लेंस होता था वो महंगा होता था, क्योंकि वहां पर फोकस पुलिंग शॉट के टाइम में नहीं होती है, जूम इन जूम आउट जो सिनेमा में होता है. इसलिए इस टाइप के सस्ते लेंसेज भी बनते थे.
ओके ओके सर.
सर आई हैड अ क्वेश्चन. सो जैसे हम फोकल लेंथ में मेंशन कर रहे हैं किसी लेंस की 35 mm फॉर 35 mm नेगेटिव या 35 mm फॉर्मेट.
एक सेकंड टाइम दीजिए, मुझे ये चैट वाला बटन ऑन करते दो. हाँ जी बोलिए.
ओके. सो जैसे कोई लेंस को बता रहे हम.
नाम क्या है?
मेरा नाम है सार्थक चोपड़ा.
सार्थक चोपड़ा, एक मिनट.
हाँ जी.
हाँ जी बोलिए सार्थक चोपड़ा.
So suppose focal length है 50 mm for 35 mm फॉर्मेट या 35 mm नेगेटिव. तो उसका मतलब क्या हुआ कि 35 mm फॉर्मेट के लिए, क्योंकि
हाँ 35 mm फॉर्मेट का मतलब यह है कि आज के टाइम में जो सेंसर आ गया है वो उस सेंसर में उसने नेगेटिव को रिप्लेस कर दिया. ठीक है, जब आप बोलते हैं आज के टाइम में कैनन 5D Mark IV जो है फुल फ्रेम कैमरा, क्या मतलब हुआ इसका कि उसका साइज जो है सेंसर का वो 35mm निगेटिव के साइज के बराबर है। और जो स्टिल फोटोग्राफी के अंदर अगर आप देखेंगे सेंसर साइज, तो आपको सेंसर साइज पता लगेगा वो जो निगेटिव का साइज है उससे छोटे सेंसर होते हैं। तो जो अचीवमेंट है सेंसर इंप्रूवमेंट के अंदर कि द बिगर द साइज ऑफ द सेंसर बेटर द इमेज वुड बी, करेक्ट। ऐसे ही सिनेमा के अंदर भी अभी लार्ज फॉर्मेट इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ है। अभी मैं बात नहीं करूंगा, वो मैं एंड के टाइम में बात करूंगा लार्ज फॉर्मेट के बारे में। तो वो क्या है वो लार्ज फॉर्मेट? लार्ज फॉर्मेट जैसे स्टिल फोटोग्राफी के अंदर फॉर्मेट अलग था, सिनार तक का अलग साइज मैंने आपको अभी बताया पीपीटी के अंदर जो है कि ये अलग अलग साइज का नेगेटिव अलग अलग कैमरा, मामी अलग देगा, हैसलब्लेड अलग देगा, सब मीडियम फॉर्मेट है, उनकी विड्थ फिक्स है बट उनका साइज जो है लेंथ जो है चेंज हो रही है। तो इसकी वजह से एरिया भी चेंज हो रहा है, इमेज एरिया इमेज फॉर्म्ड इनटू अ सर्टेन अमाउंट ऑफ एरिया, ओके, दैट इज आल्सो बिकमिंग लार्ज एंड स्मॉल। तो यहाँ पर जो है जब आप बात कर रहे हैं, जो आपका क्वेश्चन है कि ये कि भाई इसका क्या मतलब हुआ, उसका मतलब केवल इतना ही है कि इस फॉर्मेट के लिए मेरे सेंसर का साइज ये है, ये फुल फ्रेम है, ये ज्यादा है, साइज ऑफ ए सेंसर is being measured and that is what we call it in a still camera also। मीडियम फॉर्मेट का जो ये कैमरा है, इन्होंने भी अपने सेंसर जो निकाले हैं वो बड़े सेंसर निकाले हैं स्टिल फोटोग्राफी के अंदर भी, बट सिनेमा में अभी जो लार्ज फॉर्मेट कैमरा इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ है उसकी वजह से सबसे बड़ा पंगा क्या हुआ कि लार्ज फॉर्मेट लेंसेज भी इंट्रोड्यूस होने पड़े। हर कंपनी ने जब लार्ज फॉर्मेट कैमरा इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ एलेक्सा से और सोनी ने इंट्रोड्यूस किया, हर कंपनी ने लार्ज फॉर्मेट कैमरा इंट्रोड्यूस किया, तो उसके लिए लार्ज फॉर्मेट लेंसेज भी चाहिए। क्यों? क्योंकि सेंसर का साइज चेंज हो गया, डायगोनल चेंज हो गया, डायगोनल के हिसाब से सारा चक्कर होता है लेंस का, कौन सा नॉर्मल है कौन सा क्या है। बिकॉज ऑफ दैट द एरिया नीड टू बी कवर्ड मोर एंड हेंस अ डिफरेंट फॉर्मेट ऑफ लेंसेज केम कॉल्ड लार्ज फॉर्मेट लेंसेज। तो इसका बेसिक मतलब इतना है, इससे ज्यादा कुछ नहीं।
तो जो फॉर्मेट है 35mm फॉर्मेट, इज इट डायरेक्टली रिलेटेड टू द आउटपुट जो इमेज का है कि उसका साइज का?
बिल्कुल, जितना बड़ा सेंसर होगा उतनी बेटर इमेज होगी आपकी।
ओके, कि इतना, जैसे हमने बात करी थी प्रिंट के बारे में कि अगर बहुत बड़े बैनर्स प्रिंट,
वो तो बात की बात है, प्रिंट की बात तो बाद में हो रही है।
ओके,
प्रिंट की बात बाद में हो रही है, यहाँ पर तो हमेशा ही सिनेमा हॉल में फिल्म दिखाई जाएगी। वो एक अलग बात है कि नेटफ्लिक्स छोटे से मोबाइल में भी दिखा रहा है, बट उसका स्टैंडर्ड वही है सिनेमा वाला। सिनेमा के स्टैंडर्ड से रिजोल्यूशन उनको चाहिए होता है, दैट इज व्हाट दे आस्क फॉर। दैट्स व्हाई सर्टेन काइंड ऑफ कैमरास आर बीइंग अप्रूव्ड बाय सिने नेटफ्लिक्स। एक बार आप देखेंगे दिस कैमरा इज बीइंग अप्रूव्ड बाय नेटफ्लिक्स, क्या मतलब हुआ इसका? इसका मतलब ये है कि इस कैमरे का जो सेंसर है वो नेटफ्लिक्स ने उसका साइज जो है अप्रूव किया हुआ है। अगर आप उस स्टिल फोटोग्राफी के कैमरे पर शूट करोगे तो इसे अप्रूव, आप उनकी नेटफ्लिक्स की साइट पे जाके देखेंगे तो उन्होंने टेक्निकल स्पेसिफिकेशन में कहीं ना कहीं ये लिखा हुआ है, दीज आर द कैमरास वी हैव अप्रूव्ड।
ओके।
तो विशांत तोमर प्राइवेटली, सर आई हैव, पूछ लें, पढ़ लूं मैं, यहाँ पर सब कुछ प्राइवेटली चल रहा है।
Yes, sir. You can read the questions.
I have seen that different lenses render color differently. Yes. Does both the camera, sensor and lenses affect the color of the final image? Yes. It is the lens as well as the sensor, which and also the mechanism of processing, because there is so much of electronic involved into that. So lens, sensor, which means processing of the image, which will affect the color. If so, what is the different way with which they have the effect on colors? I have seen that different lenses render color differently.
Sir, वो repeat करे, same ही है.
So yes, so basically a lens would affect the first important thing of a camera is a lens. 50mm lens made by a company A, B, C would be different of 2 lakh, 5 lakh, 10 lakh. ओके, तो लेंस के ऊपर जो कोटिंग होता है उसके ऊपर 8-10 टाइप का कोटिंग होता है लेंस के ऊपर, अलग अलग रीजन के लिए। ये जो ग्लास में पहन के बैठा हुआ हूं, इस ग्लासेस के ऊपर भी 7-8 टाइप की कोटिंग है, जिसकी वजह से एक्सपेंसिव ग्लास। Okay, so you do some research on the coating of glasses, spectacles. You will understand 7-8 different kind of coating. In cinema lenses, there is many more kind of coating, because of which the image distortion and many more factors would be taken care. And that is the why cost of a lens. What makes a cost of a lens more expensive is a coating. One of the element is coating on the lens. What kind of coating the lenses has? Because of that, the cost of the lens will go higher. Okay, lens, sensor, and the processing mechanism of the camera, they all will formulate into a color rendition, and hence all not only two different brands, I would say two similar cameras of the same brand, same company, would also reproduce different colors.
Okay, sir.
That's why the color correction is required to match the colors later on in DI. We call it digital intermediate. So DI is nothing but color renditions. So there's something called LUT, which we'll talk about later on, not right now. So LUT is a very, very important part of color rendition and color correction. So that's in between. Shreyas Sawant, in anamorphic lenses, why there is suppressed background even in 16 mm, whereas Sony 16 mm does not do that. Can you please explain normal 16? Also, it has to see the image compression has to do with the depth of field. Image compression has to do with the depth of field. So cinemascope lenses are always you get less depth. That's one of the reasons why people don't prefer the shoot on cinemascope lens. 50 mm lens of a cinemascope, 50 mm lens of a normal 35 mm format will have a much more depth of field comparative to the cinemascope lenses because of the mechanism. The number of elements goes into the manufacturing of the lens. If you have ever seen a cinemascope lens, it's a very heavy lens. So many elements are required to compress the image while you are shooting it, and later on in the projection, it is decompressed. So manufacturing mechanism, it is a manufacturing mechanism flaw, or call it as a requirement. They cannot go beyond that. If you look into the cinemascope focal length, compare the depth of field in that chart, you will find depth of field in the cinemascope lens is less comparative to the normal lenses. So that's why the background look compressed. Like a movie Tenet, it's used. No, Tenet के अंदर दूसरा कैमरा इस्तेमाल हुआ है, वो IMAX कैमरा है. आप अगर फोटोग्राफ देखोगे उसके शूट के, तो बड़ा अजीबोगरीब सा एक कैमरा जो है पकड़ के वो आदमी बैठा हुआ है. होते वन होते. तो वो जो कैमरा है, that is a different camera. We call it as a IMAX camera. It has a different mechanism altogether. So that's a different thing.
It's mixture of both film and digital, right?
They shot with a different format, and occasionally they also use some other thing. So, but majority of that thing is being shot with IMAX format, and later on they convert it into different cinema hall, different format. So that is that's why these cinema halls are surviving. If nobody will shoot on IMAX, who will go and watch the film on IMAX cinema hall? The DOP, depth of field of CP2 lenses are in a circular shape in comparison with prime block lenses. Why is it so? DOF, depth of field. That's what you mean, Chirag Rajput? Chirag Rajput, are you sleeping?
Yes.
First of all, it is not depth of field. Try to understand one thing. 50 mm lens for a normal 35 mm format, manufactured by CP2, Arri, Carl Zeiss, Carl Zeiss is the name of the company, Cook Optics, or there are Raptor, and there are 10 companies which manufacture the lenses, only lenses. Depth of field will remain same. It depends upon certain factor, which I would discussing tomorrow. It is not the manufacturing company because of which the depth of field will change. Depth of field will change because of how you are using it, what aperture you are using, what is the distance between the subject and the camera, what is the aperture it has. So basically there are three factors. One is distance between the subject and the camera. Second is aperture, and third is focal length. These are the three major factors which determine the depth of field, and fourth is also sensor size nowadays. Okay, so fourth is also important, but basically it is a three factor. So that is not the reason. Whether it is a CP2 series, whether it is a signature series, or whether there is another series, it has nothing to do with that thing. And they all are block lenses. CP2 series is a block lenses series. So it is depth of field has nothing to do with the series. From Murugan K. In today's age, in the industry, are zoom cinema lenses are used or just fixed aperture lenses? No, not fixed aperture lenses, fixed focal length lenses. There is no fixed aperture lens exists. It is a fixed focal length. So today, and 20 years back also, zoom lens quality was so good with some of the companies like Enjunus. Enjunus is the topmost company in manufacturing the zoom lenses. It's a French company. No one can compete with them. Not even Arri. They only used to manufacture only zoom lens, not even block lenses. But now they have started manufacturing block lenses also. So zoom lens quality was so brilliant that some of the cinematographers use only zoom lens. And you can't figure it out whether it is shot with the zoom lens or focal length. It's easy to switch from one lens to another. But there are some other brand of cinematographer who will not use the zoom lens at all. I am one of them who will use the block lenses. It is a personal choice. Quality wise, technically speaking, the difference is bulkiness of the zoom lens. If you are using a handheld shot, you can't use the bulky zoom lens. You need to have a block lenses. But
yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
If you are quickly, you have to change one focal length to another, and there is hardly any time, you will prefer to use the zoom lens. You move the lens, there is no way you remove and another lens will come and mount and blah, 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 blah. Sometimes there is no scope also. Suppose there is a fog outside. If you remove the lens, fog will enter into the camera. So there is a compulsion of the environment also. I shot a feature film into the Arunachal Pradesh. There you can't remove the lens. So I have to figure it out how I can shoot with the one lens only. I will devise my shot in such a way, but sometime if it is required, so it is required. As simple as that. So we'll take the camera inside, if there is a less fog, and moisture will not condense, because from cold to hot, inside if you go comparatively, moisture will get condensed on the lens and inside also, which will create a problem. So if it is a circumstance don't allow, then you will prefer to have the zoom lens. But normally it is because of the time constraint, and it is also because of some lazy people are there who con lens and change kare, chalo ek hi laga do, baat karo. But zoom lens are always handy for sure. Okay. So what is ASA dial? ASA stand for film speed. ISO we also call it. These are the international standard. So it is meant for the basically what I said, to film speed thing. Parth Shah. I want to know why a 35mm film has sprocket holes but a 120mm film does not. Is it 120 film does
Yes,
not?
sir. So medium format film
Yeah.
does not have sprocket holes, but a 35mm film has. So now like the 35mm film has sprocket holes, so that we can add using the advanced lever, you can advance the film, right? They go into the gear teeth. But when I have seen the 120mm film, it doesn't have these holes on side. So is it just a manufacturing decision, or there is something else?
Mechanism basically, it has to do with the mechanism, how the mechanism inside with the medium format is being manufactured in such a way that you just advance that thing, and it do not require that kind of engagement of the sprocket. So that I will figure it out. I'm not 100% sure whether the 120 film do not have the sprocket. I think it should have the sprocket.
Actually,
I'm not sure. Let me just figure it out.
Okay.
Find it out this question, but I don't think there should be a sprocket business, because if the negative is a little bigger one, but I am not able to recollect immediately because I did not use the medium format camera ever. I only it. It should not have the sprocket, but I will check it out.
So the Ilford film, which
Ilford is a company.
Yeah. So Ilford is making 120 film right now. That is HP5. It doesn't have holes. That's why I was wondering.
Maybe now it is not required, probably, but mechanism would have changed there. But I will, so far as I have never used the 120 120 format film, but
Okay.
I think it should have the sprocket because that is the way the film will move further. It should.
Okay.
Earlier I'm talking about. Today I do not know, but earlier there should have been the sprocket. That's how the purpose of sprocket is to. If the film has to move from place A to B, how it will move otherwise?
Yes.
So there would be a mechanism. I would ask certain people who are using the medium format Mamiya camera. I know one or two people. I will call them and figure it out. But to my understanding, it used to have the sprocket. I will check it, reconfirm.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so Sarthak Chopra, why does the image flatten when using a tele lens? Simply because the depth of field become less, so background become blurred and hence it becomes flat. Why does the image flatten using telephoto? I told you. How to practice for practical program of JET? Very difficult question. We have 9 students who have signed up for the classroom coaching, and out of 5 days of classes, 4 days would be practical and 1 day theory. So how to practice for the practical program? This is one way. In your city, you need to figure it out. If some program where you learn the practical photography and videography is there, you could do that. Everything don't come free. Sitting at home, having a coffee, and you think practical photography would happen? No.
No, sir. Actually, I am.
No, let me answer it properly.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Spain, leave your city. 8 people have come here. I'm not saying you also come. You can stay at your place. There would be some photography classes happening over there. Some people who understand photography and videography, they will be able to teach you. Or there are some Google, YouTube videos, if you could learn from there. But if everything can happen through a YouTube, we would have died many, many years back. We survived for 15 years and we hope to survive many more years. Shivam Sharma, my question is about parfocal lens. Parfocal lens is what? Used in broadcasting camera, in digital cinematography, in shooting some sport match. How does that mechanism work? I have not used or heard about this parfocal lenses. It may be simply because in broadcasting, the zoom lens is very, very high is required because they are sitting into the studios and the game is happening over there. So it's basically high telephoto lenses, you can call them, and operated with electronic mechanism. But that's it. Nothing more than that. Physics remains same. More the telephoto, lesser the depth of field. Physics will remain same whatever kind of lens it is. What is the point of conversion in focal length? I'm not able to understand. Point of okay. What is the point of conversion in focal length? Point of conversion means where in a lens, whether it is telephoto, teleconvert, all the lenses would meet at a one point. Lens do not have a one element. It has a couple of elements, and then finally it has a various reasons why there are so many elements are there inside the lens, and finally length would converge into a point. Okay, where the image will be formed, and it is where the sensor is kept. Earlier, it is where the film is kept. That is called focal plane. So focal plane is nothing but where all the lenses would converge, rays would converge to formulate a image. Okay.
सर फोकल लेंथ जो होता है वो डिस्टेंस होता है पॉइंट ऑफ कन्वर्जन एंड सेंसर के बीच का ना?
Correct.
वही सर, वही मतलब
it is effective conversion. See, try to understand. It is not a single lens. It is a combination of so many lenses. In a single lens, you can easily say this is the focal length. यहाँ से यहाँ तक focal length है, यहाँ पे आ गया. But इसके अंदर it is a effective conversion. Effective conversion of so many elements of the lenses till a point where finally देखो lens का front element है, back element. In between there are so many elements. So overall when the lens get converged after coming out of the lens from the back element till a point where the image will be formed.
Okay, sir.
This is the answer.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? So, gentlemen, this is 8 o'clock. I hope try to answer. Before you people leave, there is something called polling, which some of you are familiar with, that you need to mark the class. If you mark 10, I'm not going to feel happy. If you mark 6, I'm not going to get depressed. It is just that through that I could gauge that what is the overall understanding of the people of the class. That is the only purpose. So before you discontinue the class, I have launched this thing, and you could go and tick whatever you want to tick. I would send the recording tomorrow of today's class so that you could go through it again. And this PPT, which I have just shown you, would also share with you.
Yeah.
Sir, I can ask a question.
Quickly.
हाँ सर, मैं जब मेरा कैमरा कैनन 200D Mark II है, तो उसके साथ मैं जब जूम लेंस 55-50 यूज करके मतलब लॉन्ग एक्सपोजर टाइप लाइट पेंटिंग करने की ट्राई करती हूँ, तब मतलब मैं एपर्चर f2.2 या फिर 16 रखती हूँ ऐसा कुछ, तब मैं जब फोकस करती हूँ तब लेंस के अंदर से खटखट आवाज आती है, तो ऐसा क्यों होता है?
देखो, मैकेनिज्म कभी अगर खराब हो रहा है या कुछ हो रहा है तो उसका रिपेयर भी जरूरी होता है, मेंटेनेंस जरूरी होता है. कभी कभी हमारे यहाँ भी जो कैमरास हैं, हम लोग कैनन के कैमरा इस्तेमाल करते हैं, उसके अंदर कई बार रिंग टाइट हो जाती है. So when you are using it in a little rough manner, it can happen. Which city you belongs to? What's your name?
शौकत गिरी.
शौकत गिरी. कहाँ से हैं आप?
वेस्ट बंगाल, झारग्राम, वेस्ट बंगाल.
तो आई कांट हेल्प इट. इन बॉम्बे में मैं किसी को जानता हूँ हु इज बेस्ट इन टर्म्स ऑफ द लेंस रिपेयरिंग. He's the best in terms of lens repairing, but in West Bengal I'm sorry, I can't help you out. तो वो रिपेयर करवाना पड़ेगा. किस कंपनी का है उनका आप सर्विस सेंटर देखिए और वहां जाके बात करिए. कौन सी कंपनी का लेंस है? कैनन. कैनन का सर्विस सेंटर आपके वहां पे जरूर होगा.
हाँ.
So you need to give it to a service center. They have a brilliant servicing station in this country. That's why one of the reason why we have a Canon cameras, not the Blackmagic. Blackmagic is much more cheaper, but Blackmagic don't have a service center in the India. So if your camera goes haywire, bas bhul jao. So okay, gentlemen, thank you so much, and hope it was useful. 109876. Okay, fine. So great. We'll see you tomorrow, and keep writing your questions, whatever discussion we had today, because at the end of the day, you have to write down the answers, and you have to be very, very clear in your writing the answers, and that's it. So great. So
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sharing.
Yes, sir.
We will also stop this meeting from here. I am coming to Zoom after quite a long time. So meeting for all.